Hello everybody again. This is my second video that I'm doing on the XGIMI Titan Noir Max. And the first one was more of a general unboxing video. I just talked generally about the projector today. I'm going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into it. I've had it now almost, I'd say probably 2 weeks. Had the opportunity to do quite a bit of things with it. Number one, most important thing is I set it up, I watched a lot of content, I watched a lot of clips that I think are kind of what I would consider test scenes, things that test different aspects of the projector to see, just how good image quality is. And I'll be talking about those today. Another thing I did is just, watched movies and watched TV shows and did stuff with the family and just use it as most people ordinarily would, as just like a projector that you use and enjoy. And we'll be talking about that too. The third thing I did is, and this is the part that takes a lot of time, is the technical analysis of how good this is. Again, I think what you see with your eyes is the most important thing, because that's how you experience things. But a lot of what we see can be measured. And the thing to understand about measurements is that they're important, but measurements, in my opinion, are not the end-all be-all of everything. It really is how things look on the screen. But still, it's good to compare and evaluate how a projector performs by looking at some objective measurements. And I did do quite a bit of that as well. And that's getting into the weeds for a lot of people. And I'm going to describe, what I measured and how I measured and the results of the measurements. But then I'm going to explain, what that means. How does that affect what you see on the screen? Because to me, that's really, again, the most important thing. So let's start, I guess. This is the projector. We showed it last time. I think that it is, I talked last time about how, you have this kind of the old-fashioned home theater projector, and then you had like the new kind of upstart, these what they call lifestyle projectors that are, really kind of meant to be more flexible. You take them where you want to go, maybe take them outside, take them on the road, whatever you want to do. But with lifestyle projectors, image quality was not necessarily the most important thing. It was really more flexibility, and it was really more, convenience. Whereas home theater projectors were something that you kind of put in your room, you put it on a shelf or on a ceiling, and there it stayed. Now, I think this is a little bit of an in-between projector, and I say that in a good way, because I think that this is an excellent home theater projector. And if you're so inclined, it's also, a good lifestyle projector, and I'll explain all of that. Now, right now, I have this on a shelf. Eventually, I think what I would do is I would mount it on a ceiling, But I, just the way it looks, I think it looks, again, this is subjective, but I think it looks really good. I think it fits into, any kind of room in a good way. I think people will enjoy it. It will be unobtrusive. It'll kind of blend in with, most modern surroundings. And on that level, I think XGIMI did a really good job. The designers did a really good job. But I mean, really, to me, that's maybe the least important thing about it. The thing that's important is how does it work? Now, what is really good about this is, if you're considering buying it, projectors can be a little bit complicated. You want to make sure, can you put it in your room? How big a screen will it work with? Will it work in the place that you're putting it? And you can check out all the specs on XGIMI's website, but the one thing that's very good about this is it's got, a very good lens. It is very sharp. You'll have a very, sharp picture, but it is also allow you to put it a lot of places in the room. It'll be very, very flexible because it's got something we talked about a little bit last time, a lens shift, and it's got a very big zoom. So odds are you'll be able to make this work in your room. Again, I would, don't take my word for it. Do a little bit of dig a little deeper. And I think that if you dig a little deeper, you'll find that there'll be a place in your room you could put it, and you'll be able to get it to work with the size of the screen that you like. Let's talk about screen sizes. Over the years that I've been involved in this projector hobby, and again, I'm a hobbyist, I'm not like a professional. When I first started, people had 100-inch screens, and that was considered big. And maybe if you had a 110-inch screen, that was even bigger. But now people are getting even bigger and bigger screens, and one of the problems with that is you need to have enough light to light up the screen. And a lot of times people didn't have enough light. You made it work, but maybe it wasn't the best experience. Maybe you had to, take some steps to make your room work, to eliminate all reflections and to eliminate all the light bouncing around. Maybe you had to put velvet up everywhere. So you had to make your room work with your projector. And that was just a fact of life. That's what people had to do. But now, because of the technology that's developed, we'll talk about that a little bit more, and that's RGB lasers. These things are pretty bright, and odds are, you can have a pretty big screen. I know people are using them with screens up to 200 inches, which is a very, very large screen, and you can make that work in a reasonably treated room. But if you don't have, or don't want, to take those measures, you can go a little smaller with your screen. You can get, a screen that helps you out by increasing the gain, meaning it'll amplify the light to your eyes even more. But I guess what I'm saying is that if you take the right steps, you can light up a pretty big screen with this thing. And I think that's something that's just now becoming possible. And what that also means is, because these things are so bright, is, you can take front projectors out of like the totally dark room. You can turn on the lights, you can play video games in the daytime. You could watch sports, with lights on in the room, and you're gonna have a really good picture. It's still going to work. One thing I have to say is that you can't just put it in, your living room with a lot of windows and expect that to happen. You've got to take some measures to control, certainly the sun. Nothing's going to beat the sun. These things aren't bright enough to combat the sun, but you can work with light. Again, think it through, take the right thought process. And, you can make a projector like this work in, some surprising situations, and with some really good results. So, today I'm really going to focus though on, because I think people are more familiar with the lifestyle case and, bringing it on. But this, I think, is really a very good home theater projector. And I'm going to kind of explain why that is. So, and the first thing I'm going to do is talk about the measurements that I did. And, when we talk about measurements, one of the first things that everybody talks about is contrast. And when I talk about contrast, I'm talking about on-off contrast. And what is on-off contrast? Just basically, very briefly, how light does the projector get as opposed to how dark the projector gets. So technically, when you're measuring on-off contrast, what you're doing is, you're displaying on screen one image that is the brightest the projector can get, and then you're taking another image which is the darkest that the projector can get. And the ratio between those two things is the on-off contrast. And you want the highest on-off contrast you can get, because the highest on-off contrast is a pretty good indicator that the projector is going to be bright, and the higher the contrast level, and at the same time you have a high contrast ratio, you're going to have a very good dark level. And dark level or black level, people talk about it a lot, but it's extremely important, I think, in enjoying movies. Cinematographers, work in shadows and light, and to really appreciate, how many movies are designed and constructed, you've got to have the ability to show that on the screen. You've got to be able to have to show on the screen, these bright whites and these dark blacks, and you've got to be able to show all of it at the same time. And the more effective a projector or any display can do that, the more kind of pleasing you're going to get. You can talk about how much does the picture pop. Pop is a word I use a lot. I don't know what pop really means, but I know it when I see it. I see an image pop, and I'm like, wow, makes me smile. And this projector made you smile a lot. It has a lot of wow moments. You'll be able to watch some of your favorite content. You'll say, this really kind of made me smile. So let's talk about it. When there is a difference when you're measuring contrast, because there's zoom in this lens. Zoom is a very good thing because it lets you have a flexible placement. But the longer that the projector has to project a beam, the better the contrast. In other words, the farther away the projector is from the screen, generally, the better the contrast is, but also generally you lose some light, so that the dimmer the image is. And at the same time, the closer to the screen the projector is, the brighter it is, but the contrast is a little worse. So in measuring this, we have to talk about one thing before we get to the actual measurements. So what makes this projector special, and this is the first one that's going to be released, in the United States and Europe, that has a special feature, which is a dual iris in the lens. And what that means is, you're taking a very bright light from the lasers, and you're trying to control it in a lot of ways. You're trying to take away what we call stray light. Because stray light is the kind of light that will get someplace it's not supposed to be. It'll, pollute the image, and it'll wash it out, right? So it decreases contrast ultimately. So what this has to control the stray light and to increase contrast is not just it's something called, you can put in the light path. The path that the light travels to get from the lasers through the lens into the screen. You put something in there called an iris, and an iris is just kind of a hole. It kind of filters out some of the light. It filters out the light that's kind of not in a focus beam. And this has not one iris, but it has two irises, a dual iris. And again, this is the first one of these, and I have experience with another one that wasn't released in the United States or in Europe, called the Dangbei S7, which also has a dual iris. But this is the first one that is being released in the United States and Europe, and I think maybe outside of China, I think that's true. So this has a dual iris, and what does that really mean? This one is very special in several ways. So the iris is adjustable, or the irises, iri, I don't even know what the plural is, but the two irises can be adjusted. And there are something called f-stops, and I'm not into photography, but those of you who are into photography are going to know what f-stops are. But you've got 5 different f-stops: f2, f3, f4, f5.5, and f7. And with f2 being kind of the brightest image with probably the worst contrast, all the way down to f7, which is going to be the dimmest image, but with the best contrast. And what really makes the Titan Noir special is that it's got another mode called a dynamic mode, which is the iris is going to automatically adjust based on the content. So you're going to get kind of the contrast you need, the best contrast that that the projector is capable of. So let's look at some measurements. And I took measurements for contrast both for long throw, again, the longest distance that the projector projected from the lens to the screen, and short throw, so the shortest distance. And and I did it kind of in two different ways. We did it what I would call native contrast, and we talked about there being an iris in the projector that helps to increase contrast. There's also another way to increase contrast, which is traditionally they're called a dynamic black or a dynamic contrast system. XGIMI calls it DBLE. And what that does is it controls the amount of laser light. So it'll dim the laser when the scene should be dark. But dimming the laser is only part of it. So when it dims the laser, if all you're doing is dimming the laser, you're just making things dimmer, and that's not necessarily good. But it also smartly increases the brightness of parts of the image so that you can lower the black floor, make the blacks look better, but also expand the whites and make the whites look better. So again, so the two big parts of this are this DBLE system and the dynamic irises. And working together, these things are going to get you some really good contrast. So all right, so let me talk about some subjective evaluations of things. And maybe these are a little bit objective too. So I talked before about another projector that I think is very good, which is the Dangbei S7 Ultra. So I took both of those and I set them up, and they were shining both on the same screen. And I just wanted to compare how they looked, right? So the first thing that I did was just put up a completely black image, right? To just see, okay, well, how they compare in terms of black. And you can see on the screen, and again, the camera exaggerates this to some extent, but you'll see that the Titan Noir is getting black when it should be black, and the Dangbei, again, although it is pretty good, it's going to have an elevated black floor. At least this is in similar modes, similar brightnesses. And how is that in actual content? So the next thing I'm showing here is there's a movie Gravity with Sandra Bullock. It's got this particular scene where you've got the blackness of space, and you've got the main character kind of spiraling into the blackness of space. So again, you've got, in this picture, you've got on the left side, you've got the XGIMI, on the right, you've got the Dangbei. And you can see as you look, the blacks of the star field are just more convincing. They're more black on the XGIMI than they are on the Dangbei. Again, it's just you're getting better contrast. Again, this is another, I think, one of the most challenging types of scenes that you can have for a projector. And this is from the movie 1917, the World War I movie. I think most projectors are going to look pretty good when you got bright content on the screen, and even if you've got black areas in the bright screen, the blacks are still going to look pretty good, and that's because of the way our eyes work. Your eyes are drawn toward the white, toward the bright part, and so you kind of, your eyes see black when maybe black isn't even as black as it should be. But in a scene like this from 1917, you can't really hide. It's not a very bright scene at all. So it's really testing how good black is. How black can the projector get? And again, I always thought that the Dangbei was really the king of this scene. and I've watched this on a lot of projectors, but when you compare, you can see how much darker the XGIMI gets. It just gets darker, and the bright areas are still bright. I wouldn't even call these bright areas. What the XGIMI is doing is drawing out like that detail in the scenes. A lot of projectors, if you look at the scene on it, you're hardly going to see anything. You're hardly going to see any detail. It's just going to be, a gray mess or even a black mess. Here you can see the detail. You can see the colors. You're going to see everything, and it's just really, I think, exceptional performance. Another, type of scene, and we saw this a little bit with the gravity scene earlier. That can be challenging. Is star fields, because star fields are black, but you really want to see the stars pop. You want to see the bright stars on the black star field, and again, you can see on the left, the XGIMI just does that, really well. You've got a black, the blackness of space and the brightness of the stars. It just is, I think a very good showing. And again, I would stress that these are kind of among the most challenging types of scenes that any projector can really attempt to do, because most projectors are going to struggle with black. So again, when you look at all these things objectively and subjectively, I really am very, very happy with the performance of this projector. I think that if the Kickstarter price, I think it's $3,000, and I think if you sign up early, there's an additional couple $100 discount. I don't know, what would compete with that at this price. Again, because of the brightness, the contrast, the color accuracy, I think that it's just a really, really good projector. All right, so you're going to say, all you've been doing is saying some nice things, so there's got to be, some things to say that aren't so nice. So I'm going to do my best on that too. There are some things that aren't done yet, maybe, or maybe could be improved. I don't think that any of these things are deal breakers, and it may be that XGIMI fixes these things either by the time it's launched or maybe after it's launched. One thing I should say is I know that the people at XGIMI are extremely active in the enthusiast community. They've got people who are posting comments, taking feedback. They set up a site to take user feedback. There are engineers at XGIMI that are taking the feedback, and they're not going to do everything everybody wants. It's just impossible, right? But they are making an attempt, I think, at engaging with enthusiasts and trying to give us what we want. And I don't know that there's anything more that we can ask other than for that type of commitment. But so what are the things that they haven't done or that need to be done? And again, not everybody's going to care about these things. Some people are going to care about them a lot. I think personally, a lot of these issues are kind of secondary issues. Again, the big things that I've been talking about are brightness, contrast, color accuracy. I think it nails those things, right? So on that level alone, buy it, I would say. But what doesn't it do? So films are films, they're not really films anymore. Nothing is filmed on film, but most movies are still made at 24 frames per second. 24 frames per second is not a lot of frames. It's not really a great way to do things, I guess, but it's just the way things have always been done in movies. And the best way to view content that's filmed at 24 frames a second is to view it with the display, playing it back at 24 frames per second. So right now, this isn't going to do that. It's going to interpolate those 24 frames and project it up to more frames. And it's going to do that. And if you're an eagle eye, and if you're looking for it or maybe susceptible to it, you're going to see, some judder motion. That'll be mostly on motion. Things may not look great. There are ways to compensate for that. They've got, motion features that will smooth things out. Again, a lot of people who are enthusiasts don't like that, don't like to use it. They'd rather you watch things in unmolested 24 frames per second. Again, make a decision. Is that a hill to die on for you? XGIMI has said that they are working on that and they plan to add it, and I believe that they will, but it's nothing in life is guaranteed. So if that's important to you, keep it in mind. Another thing is, so what we haven't talked about is this projector, the imaging chip is based on DLP technology from Texas Instruments. And DLPs are prone, some people who watch DLPs are prone to seeing what's called the rainbow effect. We call it the RBE effect. I don't see it. I think I heard a statistic somewhere that said, maybe up to 30% of people can see it. I should say, I think that statistic was promulgated by one of their competitors. So, take it for what it's worth. It's maybe up to 30% of people can see it. But it's a slight kind of what they call rainbow effect. You'll see some flashes of colors where colors are not supposed to be. There are ways now to fix that, and some competitors, or one competitor has done a very good job of doing that. This does have a rainbow effect feature to control it. It's not very good right now, but again, XGIMI has said that they're working on it and they plan to fix that. So again, I believe that they will, but nothing is guaranteed. So if rainbow effect is something that is very important to you, if it's something that bothers you, take that into consideration. And I guess the last thing I'd like to say is, well, what can be made better? What can be made better? And there's always room for improvement. Everybody has different ideas about things that should be added. A lot of people who are enthusiasts, they use scope screens with anamorphic lenses, and they want more or better support for that, and it'd be great to have those kinds of things. And I don't know whether they'll be added or not, but at least they're being considered. But for me personally, one thing that I would like to see added is, we talked about the dynamic mode. That is, I think, the best mode. It's extremely bright mode, close to 3,000 lumens with excellent contrast. The one thing I would say about it is, I've called that mode conservative, and I say it's conservative because it does all that contrast enhancement and brightness enhancement, and to me, it's almost invisible. You don't ever see it working, which is, I think, a really major accomplishment. But I call it conservative. Like I feel like XGIMI can push it a little more, at least give us the option to push it. And what that means is maybe they can have a mode that gets even blacker with better contrast than they have now, or maybe they have a mode that's even brighter than the one they have now. Maybe there'll be some artifacts that we see. There'll be a little bit of image pumping or color shifting, or things that you can get with dynamic contrast systems. Maybe that will happen. But for me, I think I could accept some of those artifacts if you get maybe more brightness or deeper blacks or those types of things. So that's something I would like to see added to this. Again, my opinion, but I'm always asking for more, right? So I'm gonna wrap this up. I think one other important thing is, we don't watch these things by ourselves. I'm not just sitting there, watching, content by myself. We have families. We use these things in real rooms with real people. I'm gonna, my wife is here. I'd like her to come here for a second, and I'm just gonna talk to her about it.
Hi.
And I would say, she's put up with me in this hobby for a long time. I've had a lot of projectors come and go out of my room, and she's been great about it. But I would say that, she's never really cared about it. You know, I think she likes the big screen. I think that she likes, you know, the way, like, you know, kids can play video games on it and stuff like that. And it just is something, you know, like our parents could come over, everybody watch, we can have a movie night. I think that much of it is something, but I think that there are things about this that she likes maybe more than she has otherwise. Like the other day we were watching, well, first of all, the one thing that she did say is she likes the way it looks.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
The other ones, she just said those are ugly boxes. This one, she thought it was pretty stylish, right? So it passes, I guess, the wife acceptance factor. You put it in your room, and you know, she didn't hate it. In terms of image quality, one thing she also said, talk about the brightness, how bright it was.
It's really bright. It's noticeably different than the other ones.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing, again, you know, I'm more of I like to watch with the lights on, but I'm more of a lights out person. I'd say she's more of a lights on person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the extra brightness was
Yeah.
something that she appreciated, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm pretty impressed with this thing. I really do enjoy it. I think I'm gonna do maybe another video where I, you know, do some more comparisons between this and some other projectors. And if there are other things that, you know, you guys want me to cover or address, you know, there are comments, you know, you reach out to me and I'll do my best to try to do it. You know, this isn't my job, you know, this is really just a hobby. So I don't have time to do everything. And I mostly do the things I'm interested in myself. So I can't promise anything, but I will do my best. Thanks for watching. I should say also, XGIMI did provide this sample to me. They didn't tell me what to say. They never did anything other than answer some questions I had. And I'm free to say anything I want. And I did say what I wanted. I wasn't, you know, they didn't tell me to say anything good or bad or otherwise. I said kind of what I think about it. So if I were you and I'm in the market for a home theater projector, this is a very good choice. If I were you and I'm in the market for a lifestyle projector, this is a very good choice. If I were you in the market for a projector for a dark room, this is a good choice. If I were you and I'm in the market for a projector for a bright room, this is a good choice.
It's a good choice for everything.
It's a good choice. So thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you soon.